What's going on, guys? I'm back with another video, and this video I'm going to talk about 3 amazing tips for the SAT writing section so that you can maximize your writing score and get that 44 out of 44. So before I go into my tips, I do want to say that as your goal for the writing section, you want to get at least a 40 out of 44. And I say this because most students may get more questions wrong on the reading section, the reading comprehension section of the SAT. So you really want to maximize your writing score so that you have some leeway to get some questions wrong on the comprehension section but still get a relatively high score on your overall reading SAT score. So by getting at least a 40 out of 44, you will be able to accomplish this goal, which is why I recommend aiming for that 40/44 area, because at that point you are really on your way to get that 700 minimum on the SAT reading section. So tip number 1 on how to get a high score on the SAT writing section would be to know your grammar rules, guys. Know exactly when a semicolon comes. Know what a semicolon means. Know what a colon means. Know when to use a dash. You have to know all of these grammar rules if you want to be successful on the SAT writing section, because numerous questions on this SAT writing section talk about comma splicing, talk about semicolon usage, colon usage, dashes, and all these grammar rules are so heavily tested that if you're able to understand all of them, you already answer like 50% of the entire writing section, maybe even 80%. The other questions being questions about like when should a sentence be placed, or what is this paragraph saying. But all the grammar questions are like 80% of the writing section. So if you know your grammar rules, that's 80% already on the SAT writing section, so you can't be complaining. My second tip is to skim the writing passages, guys. You do not really need to read the writing passages thoroughly so you understand every single word, every single point. You just want to skim the passage so you're able to answer the questions that you are faced for that passage. And the writing section in general, you have way less time than you have questions. It's not a minute per question, right? You only have like 30 to 40 seconds per question. So you really want to skim that passage and get over that passage nice and quick, with questions being answered at a high accuracy rate, right? You don't want to sacrifice speed for accuracy. That's the worst thing you can do on any section of the SAT. You want to be both fast and get your questions correct, and you can really do this by skimming the passages. This does not mean reading each line within 0.1 seconds. You want to be reading at a good pace, which is why I say skimming and not reading thoroughly, because when reading thoroughly, people tend to read slower. So that is why I say skimming. If you're able to read thoroughly quickly, then go for it, right? If you can't, then try to skim. Tip number 2.5, and I say 2.5 because this isn't a big tip, but this is a very specific tip that I think you guys can really use for their SAT writing section. Anytime you are reading a paragraph on the SAT writing section and you see those brackets, like a bracket 1, bracket 2, bracket 3, you should already know that you're about to be faced with a question that's like, where should sentence 5 be placed? Should it be placed before sentence 2, after sentence 3, etc.? So the moment you see that bracket 1, you want to go to that question that is talking about the sentence ordering. You want to read that question, read the sentence they're trying to place, and as you read that paragraph, you want to consciously think, alright, should this sentence go over here? Nah, let me read on. Should the sentence go over here? And when you find where the sentence should be placed, then you can answer that question right away. And the reason I say go directly to that question right when you see bracket 1 is because you don't want this. You read that paragraph, right? You forget the brackets, you don't really care about them. Then you arrive at that question that's talking about the brackets, and then you're like, oh shoot, where should sentence 5 be? Now I have to reread the entire paragraph to know where sentence 5 should be placed. You do not want to do that because that's just a big time waste. That's really one of the questions that can really kill your time when it comes to the SAT writing section. So that is why you skip directly to the question, and you need as much time as possible on the SAT writing section. So my third and final tip is to not pay attention to the time as much on this section as opposed to other sections. Now this is maybe a little controversial because everyone says, hey, you should always understand how much time you have left for your SAT questions, which is true, right? You want to have an idea of the clock, but you do not want to keep checking the clock on the writing section. And the reason I say this is because on the writing section, you have such little time. Because you have 44 questions in 35 minutes, so like I said, you're only getting 30 to 40 seconds per question. And you keep looking at the clock, that's seconds off the clock. And you also will feel more pressed for time, and you will start skimming like super fast, and you won't be able to retain the knowledge of the passage. You won't be able to understand the answers to the questions. You won't be able to understand the questions in general. And it's like a cycle. Like the more faster you read, the less you're able to understand, the less accurate you are with answering the questions. And that's just a cycle that spells for getting like a 30 out of 44, which is not good. Like, I personally started at a 30 out of 44 on the SAT writing section, but I worked my way up to get like a 43 out of 44 on my final take. So I'm sure you guys can too, because I sucked at reading. I really did suck at reading and writing, but through studying and through Khan Academy, I was able to get a high reading / writing score, which is a 740. So if I can do it, you guys can too. And that's really it for the SAT writing section. These are my 3.5 tips that I can give you guys on how to get a successful score on the SAT writing section. Like I said, a successful score is at least a 40 out of 44. And if you can get like a 41, 42, 43, that just helps you that much more. And I'm sure if you use the tips that I talked about in this video, as well as the tips I talked about in my SAT reading video, you can really get a high score on the SAT writing / reading section. And maybe you may be able to get an 800, which is way better than I got, because I got a 740. So that's props to you. And I hope you guys enjoy this video. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in a bit. Peace.